Well, hello there. I'm Jen Jackson, mother of 11 beautiful children. My goal is to point out that while motherhood can sometimes feel confusing and hard at times, it can also be beautiful and marvelous. As a mother, you have a superpower that cannot be duplicated. You are the true Captain Marvel. Let's talk about it. Welcome to episode 11 of Marvelous Motherhood with Mama Jen. And today I'll talk about correcting our children. My most simple correction tips are these. Talk to your child. Make your expectations clear. Clarify your reward and consequences. And then enforce them consistently. So the four verbs here are talk, make, clarify, enforce. Talk to your children, make your expectations clear, clarify the rewards and consequences, and enforce consistently. Remember that children are people. They are little humans. They have a sense of dignity. They have a sense of pride. They have a sense of self. And our goal as mothers is not to crush their spirits or to break their wills, but it's simply to train them, to teach them. And many times that comes with the task of correcting them. So I'm just here today giving my simplest tips on correcting our children at different ages and stages and what correction might look like for our children. Be mindful that if you, just like when you start a business, you put up a lot of work on the front end to enjoy your business on the back end. It's the same way with raising our children. We are a lot more involved in correcting and training the younger they are. And then we loosen the reins more and more as they get older. And that's going to show in the way that we correct our children. So let's get into it. When it comes to correcting your child who is 1 year old or younger, this is not going to be any kind of physical corrections. A child 1 year old or younger does not need a spanking or a slap on the wrist or even a pluck on the hand. A child that is 1 year old or younger does not need a lecture. Within that first year of life, a child is learning so many new things. Children learn to walk. They learn to understand the primary language of the home. They learn how to feed themselves. They're learning how to sit up by themselves. They're learning how to recognize emotional cues and facial expressions. At that young age, children can recognize those things. They're recognizing voices. They're recognizing members of their households and being able to distinguish between their family and strangers. So at that age, everything is new to them. So when it comes to correcting a child who's 1 year old or younger, first of all, the offense is normally something very simple like putting things in their mouths that shouldn't be in their mouths. That's pretty much the only offense that a baby or year old or younger has. So when it comes to correcting a child that young, you still want to talk to them because they're learning their primary language of the household, whether it's English, Spanish, Mandarin, whatever it is you speak in your household to your child, they're learning that language. So always talk to your child, even when they're babies and even when you're correcting them. So for example, if your 7-month-old is putting a piece of trash in their mouth that they found on the floor, you want to go down to their level and make the proper facial expression of disapproval and say, little baby, or whatever your child's name is, you may not eat paper, but here, you may eat this instead. And you can hand them a banana if they're old enough to eat bananas. You can hand them their toy that they're allowed to chew on. You want to just replace. You want to show them this thing is not acceptable, but this thing is acceptable. And that's it. When it comes to a 1 to 2 year old, a child who is 1 year old or younger, you're still talking to them. You're still making your expectations clear. But there's no reward or consequence to show at that age because they're still too young to understand rewards and consequences. But they are old enough to understand that you do not want them to have one thing because you took it from them, but that something else you gave to them is something that you are allowing them to play with and put in their mouths. So when it comes to correcting a child who's 1 year old or older, you still want to get down on their eye level. You still want to make the proper facial expressions. And you still want to talk to them and say, hey, we do not eat paper. Or you may not put sandals in your mouth. Those are dirty. But here, you may chew on this teething ring. Or you may chew on this elephant blanket. Or whatever it is that you like to let your child play with. That's how you would correct a child who's 1 year old or younger. Get down on their level, speak to them, make the proper facial expressions because they understand facial expressions more than words at that age. But they're still learning words, which is why you still want to talk to them. And you want to let them know that one thing is not acceptable, but also show them what is acceptable at the same time. Now, when it comes to a child who is 1 to 2 years old, at that age, they can understand what you're saying to them. They understand commands like come here, put that down, get that out your mouth, shut the door, put this in the trash. A child who is 1 to 2 year old can understand what you're saying and they know how to follow commands. So when you are correcting a child that age, you can cross over to some kind of physical correction like a pluck on the hand or a slap on the wrist when appropriate. And remember, when it comes to those kinds of physical corrections, those are not things you do when you're just annoyed with your child for blocking the TV or writing all over your favorite book. Because those are not things they're doing out of deliberate disobedience, but out of just being a regular curious toddler. You do not punish your children, no matter what the age is, just for doing something that annoyed you. I just want to throw that out there, just in case I forget to say it later. We do not show correction and punishment and rebuke for things that just annoyed us. Correction, punishment, and rebuke comes with deliberate, disobedient, and sinful behavior. Just to make that clear. So back to correcting a 1 to 2 year old, you want to, again, get to their eye level and use your words and say, you may not hit mommy, or you may not punch your sister, or you may not push so-and-so. Whatever the offense was, you must let them know your clear expectations that they may not do that thing. And you can also tell them what they can do instead. But as you tell them what they did wrong, whether, for example, if it was hitting their sister, you can say to them on their eye level, you may not hit your sister. That is not very nice. And then you can give them a pluck on the hand. Because at that age, you can start to clarify your rewards and consequences. So if your child was upset with their little sister or their little sister got hurt and they give their sister a hug, that's something you want to reward. So you go to their level and you make a happy face, the appropriate facial expressions and your words. You did a good job helping her feel better. I'm so happy. And you give them a hug. That's their reward. You gave them their reward right then and there. You got to their eye level. You made the proper facial expression, which is one of joy and happiness. And you verbalized with your words what was acceptable. But if they hit their sibling, you must do all the same things. Get down to their eye level, make the appropriate facial expression, which in that case would be a face of disappointment or disapproval. And then you would use your words. It is not nice to hit your sister. You may not do that. And then you give them the consequence right then and there with a pluck on the hand or being sent to their room. If it's a 1 to 2 year old and their offense is that they threw their body down on the floor and yelled and screamed and threw a toy across the room, you may not ignore that. You may not say, you should not ignore that. And you should not say to yourself, toddlers, what are you going to do? A child who is 1 to 2 years old is able to be corrected and trained as well. So if the offense is that your 1 to 2 year old has thrown a tantrum, threw their body on the floor, yelled and screamed, and threw their toy across the room because they were upset, you have to stop what you're doing, go over to that child, get on their eye level, make the proper facial expression, and use your words and say, you may not yell like that in the living room. If you want to yell, you have to go to your room to yell. And then you take them upstairs to their room. If they also threw that toy, you can make that clear as well. You may not yell like that in the living room, and you may not throw your toys across the room. Then you take your child's hand and you walk them over or carry them over if they're throwing their body out still to that toy. You take that child's hand and you make that child pick that toy up and take it where it belongs, whether it's a toy bucket or if they snatch it from their sibling, they take it back to that sibling, and then you take that screaming child upstairs to their room and tell them again, if you want to scream and holler, you must do it in your room. Because what that shows is that it's okay for your child to be upset, but there's a proper way to be upset. You're not allowed to be upset by throwing things and by yelling and disturbing the general peace of the household. If your child, you're letting your child know that you understand that it's still hard for them to learn to regulate their emotions, and that they do want to yell because they're very upset, and that it is okay to yell and get their emotions and frustrations out, but they may not do it in other people's faces. That's the part that's unacceptable. So when it comes to a 1 to 2 year old, it's the same rules. Look them in the eye, make the proper facial expressions, use your words, and enforce the consequences right then and there. Take the child to pick up the toy right then and there. Take a screaming child to their room to let out their emotions there right at that time. As a 1 and 2 year old, is not the time to say, if you yell, this is what will happen. If you hit your sister, I'm going to do this. A 1 to 2 year old needs that consequence to be demonstrated right then and there. Now, suppose you are in the kitchen cooking and your hand is covered in raw chicken juice because you're preparing dinner. And you notice that your 1 to 2 year old has just pushed down their baby sister. If you can't stop what you're doing and enforce your consequences right then and there, it's better to pretend that you didn't see it than to let your child know that you saw it and didn't do anything. So, it's better to do that than to let your child see that you're not going to do anything about their bad behavior. So what you should do is wash your hands off, dry them off, and go over to that sibling and say, you may not push your sibling to the floor. And then give them the pluck on the hand or being sent to their room, whatever consequence it is that you have decided to enforce. But for a 1 to 2 year old, the consequences must be demonstrated right then and there, so they can make their association right then and there. Now, when it comes to a 3 to 5 year old, a 3 to 5 year old is not only able to understand everything you're saying, but they're also able to talk back to you now. They're able to express what happened. They're able to say, well, she took my toy, to say the reason, to try to justify the reason why they pushed their sibling down. They're able to say what they're upset about and what they want, which is a good thing. It's good for the child to be able to verbalize and express themselves. But you are still the parent, and you are still in charge of correcting that child's behavior. At the ages of 3 to 5 years old, you are now able to give future consequences and rewards verbally. You are now able to say, if your child, for example, pushes a sibling, Johnny, you may not push Susie. You may never push Susie. That's not a good way to show that you're upset. If she made you upset, you tell her, or you come in and you tell me, but you may not push. If you push her again, I will give you a spanking, or if you push her again, I will pluck your hands, or if you push her again, I will send you to your room and you will not be able to play with the toys, or you will not be able to watch this TV show. Whatever consequence you have decided as the parent is best for this particular child, you already know in your head what the consequences are, and you make that clear to your child. So when it comes to 3 and 5-year-old, you get on their level if they did something wrong. You verbalize, you may not do X, Y, Z. And when you do, this is what will happen. But you also give them an alternative. If so-and-so makes you upset, you tell them, or you tell me, or you do X, Y, Z, but you may not push them or hit them. You make that expectation clear. You make the reward and consequences clear. And then you enforce it. So if that child does it again, then you must, and I say must, enforce the consequence that you said would happen if they did that behavior. If you tell your child that they will be sent to their room if they yell at their sibling again, or if they push their brother again, you have to send that child to the room when they do that thing again. Otherwise, you will be training your child to not listen to you, and you will be training your child that there are no consequences to their negative behavior. So either way, you are teaching your child something. You're either teaching them to behave themselves and to regulate and to use self-control, or you're teaching them that their actions have no consequences and they can do whatever they want, and there's no need to listen to you or your commands. So you want to teach them to have self-control, to be kind, and to follow your commands. So in order to teach them that, you must be consistent when it comes to enforcing the consequences and rewards that you have clarified and communicated to your child. And when it comes to correcting a 6 to 10-year-old, I consider a 6 to 10-year-old a big kid. By that age, there should be no more tantrums. A child 6-year-old to 10-year-old should not be throwing their body out on the ground, should not be yelling at you in public, should not be hitting other people when they're upset. Those kinds of behaviors are supposed to be eradicated in their younger years if you have been consistently enforcing your consequences and rewards. Because by 3 to 5-year-olds, they were able to understand all of that. If you haven't done that yet because you didn't learn those things, or you were just trying to make your child happy, or you were trying to try different types of parenting techniques like gentle parenting or whatever kind of philosophy you were using, and all it turned out was to have an 8-year-old who still throws tantrums in public, then you may need to go back to the discipline that I showed you for the 1 and 2-year-olds and the 3 and 5-year-olds, which are the 1 and 2-year-old is enforcing the consequence right then and there. And the 3 or 5-year-olds is you let them know if you do it again, this is the consequence. And then if they do it again, you enforce that consequence consistently. You have to go back to those strategies if your child is already past 6 years old and is still throwing tantrums or hitting or yelling at people. But if you reach the stage where your child is 6 to 10 years old and they're past that, tantrums and all those things, the next stage of correction is being able to explain to them. So when they're younger, 1 to 2 and 3 to 5, you just tell them, we don't hit. That's not very nice. You may not yell like that. That's unacceptable. But when they're 6 to 10, you can explain. When you hit somebody, that's abusive. And you're not allowed to go around abusing your siblings. Or you may even say something like, when you hit your sister, you are hitting my daughter. And I don't let anybody hit my daughter. Just like I don't let anybody hit you. And you can explain to them more the reason why you have the rules that you have. But also for a 6 to 10-year-old, it's also time for them to start taking on more responsibilities because they're getting older. And remember, these little children that you are training them to be responsible adults. So you teach them chores now. A 6-year-old is old enough to start doing any chore in the house. They're old enough to learn how to clean the bathroom. They're old enough to learn how to do dishes. They're old enough to learn how to help in the garden. They're old enough to learn how to help cook meals, how to help straighten up the living room, how to help wash the table and sweep the floor of the dining room. A 6-year-old can help with all those things. So between the ages of 6 to 10, your child should start getting more and more responsibilities around the house. Being in charge of cleaning their own rooms from top to bottom. Being in charge of sorting their own clothes and putting them away. You should start giving more responsibilities to your children around the household. And you can, as I said before, explain to them at this age, you help do laundry because you're going to get older and you're going to need to learn how to do these things. You help to cook because you're going to have to learn how to cook for your own family one day. You help to clean a living room because we're all contributing to keeping our house clean and neat. And this is your particular job. Now, when your child who's 6 to 10 years old does something wrong and you're ready to correct them, again, you talk to your child face to face. You make your expectations clear. If they did something wrong, you let them know the consequences of doing that wrong thing. Or as you make your expectations clear, you let them know the consequences of not fulfilling those expectations. Let them know the consequences of not doing the dishes when they were told to. Let them know the consequences of not cleaning their room when they were supposed to. But also, let the rewards be clear. Since you do such a good job doing your chores, we're going to go to Rita's Water Ice as a family every first Saturday of the month because I love you guys and I'm happy about what you're doing. That's a reward system. So whatever the consequences or rewards are regarding your expectations for them as a parent, enforce them consistently. If you say you're going to reward them with something, then keep your word and do that thing. If you say there's a consequence to the wrong action that they did, then enforce that consequence if that wrong action is done by your child. When it comes to an 11-year-old and up, and notice I said 11 and up, I didn't say 11 to 14 or 11 to 16. By the time your child is 11, that's a young adult right there. They may not have hit puberty completely yet by 11 years old, but they understand so much. By the time your child is 11 and up, they have reached what we call in the classical world the dialectic and rhetoric stage of their life. They're at an age now, at 11 and up, where they like to ask questions. They want to know why we do things a certain way. And it's important to answer those questions. They want to know why we have certain rules and why are there certain standards and who put those in place. Answer those questions for them because they are little adults in training. And by 11 years old, your child should be past the stage of constantly correcting their behavior. They should already by that stage know good social cues, how to behave themselves in public, how to control the volume of their voices when they're inside. By that age, 11 and up, they already know not to stand on tables and couches. They already know not to throw toys across the room when they're upset. They already know they should not be yelling in anyone's face. If you find that you have a child who is 11 and up, who is doing those things, who is still hitting people, who is still throwing tantrums, who is still yelling in people's faces, who is still throwing things across the room, you need to go back to previous correction methods for younger children. And so you can show them that those things are not acceptable. But for the typical 11-year-old and up who has already been trained in those things, who already knows how to keep their voices down when they're in public spaces, who already knows how to be considerate of others, who already knows not to yell in people's faces or throw things across the room or throw tantrums or hit people. If you have that 11 and up child, then the way you correct them is through lectures and reasoning. You let them know, hey, I asked you not to ride your bike around the corner right now at this time of day because people are coming home from work and I don't know if they're going to watch the children in the streets. And I asked you to ride your bike only in front of the house now after 5 p.m., but you went around the corner. So you talk to them and let them know that if you do that again, you will lose your bike privileges all next week or whatever your consequence will be. And then if they do it again, you enforce that consequence. By 11 and up, corrections can just look like lectures, giving lectures and reasoning with them. It can also look like having their privileges revoked. They might lose time on their phone or time on their screens. They may not be able to go to a certain function with their friends they wanted to go to because of something disobedient that they did. But when it comes to correcting someone 11 and up, you still want to talk to them. You still want to make your expectations clear. You still want to clarify your rewards and consequences. And you still want to enforce that consistently. Because consistency is always key when it comes to training and correcting our children. So just as a quick recap, when it comes to correcting our children, we must remember that they are people. We're not trying to break their spirits or break their wills. We're just trying to teach them how to be adults properly. So for a 1 to 2 year, 1 year old or younger, you want to look them in the eyes, get on their level, let them know we don't do XYZ, but you can do this instead. And that's it. When it comes to a 1 to 2 year old, you let them know verbally what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do, and you enforce the consequence right then and there. When it comes to a 3 to 5 year old, you let them know that such and such is not acceptable. You can do this instead. But if you do that unacceptable thing again, this is what your consequence will be. And then if they do it again, you enforce that consequence right then and there. Now remember, with those children 5 and younger, if they're doing something wrong that you already explained to them not to do, and you are unable to get them right then and there to enforce that consequence, it's better to act like you didn't see it than to let them know that you saw it and didn't do anything. You must be consistent, especially in those younger years. When it comes to a 6 to 10 year old, remember you can now talk to and reason with them. You can explain the reason why we have certain things, but you're also going to give them more responsibilities and more privileges. And now their consequences can include just having privileges revoked. And when it comes to children who are 11 years old and up, they are young adults at that stage. They should be past the stage of tantrums and yelling and hitting. And their method of correction, your method of correction with them, rather, would be giving lectures and reasoning with them and revoking privileges. And one thing that I've learned when it comes to correcting children and disciplining them is that they really are little adults in training. And we should be aiming to raise happy adults, not happy children. It's not about spoiling them and entertaining them and dropping everything to make them feel entertained whenever they see they're bored. But our job is to raise them to be happy adults. So teaching them to do their own laundry, to help wash dishes, to not yell in people's faces, to regulate their emotions, and to use self-control are all important things to teach our children that we should not ignore. But it may sound like a lot to do all those things, but all of this leads into one of the reasons why motherhood is marvelous. Motherhood is marvelous because we as mothers get to foster and enjoy a close relationship with another human being that we help train to grow into an adult. And then we get to watch that lifetime movie unfold before our eyes, watching a tiny, beautiful little baby who is completely dependent on us, cute and chunky and lovable and squeezable, grow up into a curious toddler who learns to be independent but still needs you. And then that toddler grows to be a big child, a big kid or a teenager who's even more independent, who's learning how to communicate, who's learning how to navigate this world on their own, through their own eyes, and develop into their own personalities and styles and interests. And then that teenager becomes a young adult who's fully independent, who's living life on their own and learning new things about life and fostering relationships between their friends and their significant others and learning to build their own families or their own careers. And then we see that young adult become a full-blown adult, having their career established, having their family established, watching them raise their own children. I can only imagine how miraculous it must feel for a mother to see what once was her tiny baby now cradling their own tiny baby, teaching their own toddlers. It has to be a beautiful thing. So keep up the good work. Keep correcting your children. Make sure you're consistent. Talk to them. Make your expectations clear. Make your rewards and consequences clear. Enforce them consistently. And just watch your child bloom and blossom into adulthood. And have a marvelous day, Mama. You've got this.